Welcome to Commander Central, our very special bonus episode. We have cast Nexus of Fate and are taking an extra turn at instant speed. I'm Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm not a cheap player who plays that card. I'm Chris.
You're agreeing with, was it Brando or Ryan who's like, I don't play blue?
Both of them.
Today we're going to do a deck tech and talk about a deck called the Knights of Alesha.
Finally, my colors.
Yeah, exactly. I actually really liked this concept, but we'll get to that in a few minutes. First, any interesting games anyone played this week?
I don't play this peasant format.
you just play tested Modern Storm the whole time.
No, it was so packed in there. The only reason that
it was
I came in,
crazy packed.
I was actually not even going to come in on Tuesday, but I came in. I was like, well, if someone wants to play a game or whatever, and people just kept coming in and in and in. So
right,
I just sat in a corner and played Modern.
Well, and I had one guy, a younger player, who's been there he's been coming for a couple months.
Yep.
And I've played with him before, and he actually talked to me. He's like, so I saw you on Command Zone. What's going on with that? And I was like, well, we did that video last year for their 20th episode. They had a bunch of content creators and stuff. And he's like, yeah, I was watching it, and then I heard your voice and Chris laugh. And I was like, why are guys from my shop on Command Zone?
We got hookups.
Magic.
Yeah. So then he's
Ooh, I see what you did there.
Right, exactly. But then he's like, then I realized you got a podcast, so I've been listening to all your episodes. I'm like, oh, well, that's, cool. But that probably is kind of weird when you're like watching Command Zone or something, and they're like, those dudes are guys I play Magic with.
I had a guy come up and he's like, oh yeah, I built this Omnath Locust Rage deck. You want to look it over? I'm like, I know nothing about Commander. He reaches over and grabs out one of our cards and he's like, yeah, you do. And I'm like, oh, nuts.
Was that on Monday?
Yeah, I think it was.
When
the guy's name was Trevor.
Yep,
really nice
right
guy.
before I walked into the shop.
So yeah, we can't escape it now. Maybe we shouldn't be telling everyone to come to the shop on Tuesday and play with us.
I'm
That's
just gonna
hide.
I'm gonna go Mission Impossible and get like the cool
there we
latex face mask and change it every week.
So I watched the Mission Impossible movies with my son in the last month. We went through and watching them. And in the very first one where he breaks into the vault and does like that famous scene where he descends down from the ceiling, my son's like, did they get that from Despicable Me? Because they do a parody of it in Despicable Me. I was like, no, it's the other way around. He's like, oh, okay.
Oh, to be young again.
Exactly. I played, I got there late, so I only got in a couple games. And I mentioned this last week as well, but I'm still screwing up Abundance on a regular basis, so I may be taking that out of my deck, just not have to deal with it.
That's what I told you to do.
Well, so I was going to do it for a closeout question. I kind of mentioned it last week, but I guess I'm
3 days ago.
Yeah,
not last
right,
week. 3 days ago.
I'm just going to ask it here. Is there a point, we mentioned humility as well, is there a point where like you screw up a card enough, or it's complicated enough, or annoying enough, where even though it's good, you don't run it in a deck?
Nope, I still play Ristic Study if I play blue, just to irritate my opponents.
But
even if I don't get
example.
the card draw, I just to irritate
That's
them.
a good example. I actually only run Ristic Study in one deck because I'm like, I don't want it in every blue deck. I don't have it in my Talrand deck. Like, I just don't want to be every time I play.
That brings another aspect to the game of getting into your opponent's minds, because they're just going to get irritated with it.
It is irritating.
Pay one. Did
you pay it?
And then they're going to get irritated and they're going to start misplaying themselves.
Maybe. That's not, I don't want to be irritating, but I see what you're saying.
That's the spike coming out in Chris tonight.
Exactly.
It's what I do when I play Modern. I try to get in people's heads. That's how you're supposed to play.
You for sure do.
Yeah, you do.
So, Max, how about you? Like, are there cards you're just like, I know it's good in this deck, but I just don't want to deal with it?
Yeah, but I can't come up with examples because I've probably cut it by now.
Sure.
Like, Path of Discovery would be the closest I've come recently, just because it's so trigger intensive. It's like, I missed it.
Cathar's Crusade.
Yeah, Cathar's Crusade, yep.
I play that, but I usually only let it hit the board when I'm going to win.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to deal with it aside from that.
And actually, the deck where I ran, I did run it, but it was always an annoying card. And I kind of the same thing. There were times I would hold it back because I'm like, I only want to play it when I know I can win, so I'm going to deal with keeping track of dice on everything. So I think Abundance might be one of those cards where I'm moving into. Yes, it's great because it also has some weaknesses. I only care if I have Sylvan Library out, or I only care if I'm doing kind of that storm turn where I don't want to draw land. And I replaced Helmut's Archive with it. And I think I'm better off just drawing 2 cards when I play a creature than I am not drawing a land. Because I can still hit instants or sorceries that don't do me any good either. So I think drawing 2 is probably better for that than I am not drawing lands anyway.
I think Abundance is better off in a deck where you're not extensively drawing cards. So you don't have
Yeah.
a trigger every single time type of deal.
Or like a deck where you need it to be a land.
Yep.
Like to go the other direction, I'm playing Windgrace or something, and I want to make sure I get a land to hand. Or Gitrog. I want to make sure I get my land with Gitrog so I can then pitch it and keep doing that loop.
Agreed.
It's a cool card. I just don't think it's. I think number one, it's not perfect for that deck. Number two, I'm just screwing it up and missing triggers too much that I'm just gonna not run it. But I think that's legit. Like if you're messing a card up and you're not taking advantage of it, maybe you just need to be like, that's what it is, and I'm just not good at this card, and I just need to not run it.
Just put in that new Convoke guy or Indestructible, whatever he is, the new mono green guy in there.
The new
The buy a box
Oh
promo
yeah,
guy?
yeah,
Yeah. Just do it.
the Convoke Crawworm, whatever he is. He's ginormous. Okay, social media. If you want to hit us up and tell me that I am a total scrub because I miss every abundance trigger, where would you find us?
So you can find us online at cmdrcentral.com. Facebook search us, cmdrcentral.com. A lot of times I look at it but don't respond, so don't get mad at me if there's no response right away. Find us on the Twitter birds at cmdrcentral. It's usually where we respond to everything.
Yes, indeed.
Most of the time. Or we just post random stuff like one drops and I don't know. My Twitter's been blowing up so much I just threw my phone across the room today.
What you can get with Teleria West.
Exactly.
And then you can find most of our content online on YouTube. Search it up. You can watch us. It's a blank screen. I'm terribly sorry. Don't hate me. Hate our production crew. They don't love us enough.
Hey, that's me.
And if
I thought you were the accountant and Dana was like the manager. And
Okay, then you can start editing.
Right, exactly. Well, if you want to buy your own copy of Abundance so you can screw it up less than me and hold it over me, where would you do that at?
Flipsidegaming.com.
And if you wanted to get your own possible potential box of Guilds of Ravnica, you could also do that there.
By using our promo code CMDR on your purchase, and you'll get entered to win that box of Guilds of Ravnica, which will be given away to one lucky person who uses our code.
And speaking of contests, Max.
Yeah, so our contests, we are running our calculators and picking the winners, and we'll be announcing the winners of the Patreon contest for the fully suited up Marin deck from Commander Anthology 1 from D20 Gaming here in Eau Claire. So thank you, Phil and Savannah, for that. And we'll also be announcing our Twitter contest winner of the oversized Jester's Cap from Dana's Collection Adventures.
That'll be on the regularly scheduled Monday show coming in a couple days after this one.
Yes.
So.
And we will be announcing our new contest probably the week after that.
Yeah, I would think so. All right. Let's jump into doing some deck tech action here. You guys ready for it?
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's do it. So this is Alesha.
The best Boros general ever.
Well, you remember.
That is totally contradictory to 2 weeks ago.
Matt Morgan on EDH Trackcast always says red is the sixth best color in EDH. That always makes me laugh.
Wow, waist bump out red.
Right, exactly. So some quick overviews here. It's a Mardu deck, as Chris mentioned, 3.44 average CMC. I like the idea. First of all, I've mentioned on the show way back in the day, like I kind of had wanted to try to do a Night Tribal deck. And it never really occurred to me to try Alesha for that, but I think it makes sense. If you want to do a Night Tribal, I like the idea of using Alesha.
But she's not a knight.
That's the one problem. She's a human warrior.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the tribal stuff that you would normally run that like buffs would buff your tribe or destroy everything but your tribe or whatever is gonna skirt it. But I still like her.
Yep.
So Max, you want to read the description of this deck?
Yep. So this deck came from patron supporter Josh. He supports us at the $15 level, so gets him this show dedicated to him. So
His own special show. He got his own show.
yes.
Congratulations, Josh.
Thank you, Josh, and congratulations. So his little description says, Alesha and her band of outcast knights will do anything to achieve victory, even resorting to necromancy and sorcery. Most of the knights are recurable with Alesha's ability, and the rest can be cast from the graveyard once Hacken is on the board. So sack effects aren't as costly. The ability to recur most of the creatures also lets you abuse land tax triggers to thin lands out of your deck and dump knights into the yard. Many times board wipes are one-sided thanks to Knight Exemplar allowing alpha strikes Also, the combo of Quendi and Gisela is also fun just to 20 someone out of nowhere. In general, the goal is to abuse the Mardu's great removal and board wipes to control the board, then swing in with indestructible knights buffed by Martin Stromgold and any other Anthem effects I may be playing.
All right, that is the summation.
Yep.
Josh has a really cool Alesha altar as well, and I think we will post a picture of that on the Twitter birds when this episode comes out, because it's a really good-looking card also.
Mm-hmm. Some notes, so when we do these, we always reach out to our supporters, and I ask them the questions like, what's your meta like?
Yep.
What's your cost limit for cards we need to recommend? Obviously, we're not just going to put ABUR duels in your decks, because they're expensive. And
I have to go back through my notes. Hold on.
Wait, yours don't say Guildgate?
I don't support guild gates. What are you talking about?
Oh, God. Who are you?
You don't, but Ramos does.
I want to see if Raphael comes after me again.
Right, does he?
So, I asked him all the questions, and, the main thing was, any suggestions we had, try to keep at the $20
Sure.
or under level, which is totally doable. You know, a lot of great cards for way less than
Absolutely.
Like guild gates.
Like Guild Gates.
And
Alesha.
Right, yeah. So let's look at lands first. Land base is always an easy one to start with.
Yeah. So he's running 37 lands, total lands. There's a bad lands. That's really the duel he has, because it came in a collection from a family member or something, I think is what he told me. So 18 basics. That seems kind of high in 3 colors, but I guess it does consistently get lands into play untapped, and for all we know, he plays in a Blood Moon heavy meta.
Yeah, that's one thing I always wonder when I see a 3-color deck with that many basics. Is I'm like, well, does your best friend who you play with in a pod every week run Blood Moon or Back to Basics or something? Because that's a real thing.
I think I play 12 to 15 basics in my Alesha deck.
Okay, all right. I think I have, for my 2-color decks, the most I have is 14 in one of them, and my 3-color deck that's no longer together, but I think I've usually stuck around 12, so it's more than I run. But it's not a crazy amount. Like it's not 12 of each color or something.
Right. I think it's totally acceptable, especially in Mardu, where you don't really have much ramp to rely on if you're playing like green or something, and you're really relying on artifacts to get you your extra mana. So, like I said, guaranteeing those lands always come in untapped, it's probably just nice.
Yes. So assuming this is not a situation where you're worried about Blood Moon regularly or Back to Basics, there's a couple land things. Like, I don't think you should go down to 10, but I think there is a little bit of room with 18 to put in a few utility lands or something. A couple ones that jump out at me is Nomad Outpost comes into play tapped and makes any of your colors. I like Exotic Orchard a lot. I did an EDH Rec article where I simmed out 400 games to see how often it made
your colors,
and something like, I can't remember if it was 83 or 84% of the time, by turn 3 it was making 2 of your 3 colors of mana. So really consistently it was almost always hitting your colors, and some high percentage was also hitting all 3. So I think Exotic Orchard probably is going to get you there more consistently than Nomad Outpost in terms of not coming into play tapped. And so that's maybe one change I would make. That's not altering your basic count at all. Are there any other ones that jump out at you guys? That's also really budget friendly change to make too. Exotic Orchard is 50 cents.
Yeah, that is true. I don't know. I played Nomad Outpost in mine too, just because it is another dual-ish type land.
And you can maybe swap a basic out for it too then.
Yep.
And it's good on turn 1.
Yeah.
I mean, guaranteeing all 3 colors on turn 1.
For the most part, you don't care dropping this on turn 1.
The one that for Exotic Orchard that you were talking about, that if I were to replace anything in here aside from basics, would be Path of Ancestry.
Because there's not that many creatures.
Well, and none of them share a creature type with Alesha.
With Alesha, with your commander.
Human.
So it's a...
there's some, but there's not that many humans. There's some humans, but I don't know if it's enough. And there's not that many creatures to begin with. So there's going to be enough times where it doesn't tap for what you need it to. I mean, it's fine, but I don't think it's as good here as it is in some tribal decks. I don't run it in my Sphinx deck because I'm at 18 Sphinxes, and I don't think it's consistent enough.
Now, if it came in untapped, it would be a different story.
Sure.
He's running the slow fetches, so Rocky Tar Pit, which it's a nice budget friendly version. I think it's a little slow though. I think just a basic or like a land destruction land or even
or pain lands.
or a pain land. Yeah,
Vault of the Archangel.
there we go.
Well, that's in my notes as one of the lands I would say to run, particularly because knights tend to be kind of small, and being able to make them into and they have first strike.
A lot of knights have first strike.
So being able to make them into blockers that no one wants to deal with is really useful. First strike is really useful, and there's plenty of times when, like, if you've got 4 or 5 creatures that are 2/2s, 3/3s, and you do that swing and then turn vault sideways, that life gain, it's like an extra turn almost. It buys you an extra turn of life before someone has to can kill you and win the game.
Yes.
I mean, it's not always great, but it's saved my butt, and it's cost me games when someone else has used it against me, and I thought, okay, next turn I can hit him for 18, I'll be okay, and suddenly his life total's at 44. And you haven't. I think there's enough room in this deck to run it without screwing up your color fixing too, so I like that as well. Grave Hate, which was something we talked about on a show fairly recently. I do get the Scavenger Grounds hits your own graveyard. So there's some stuff here that cares. I mean, it's Alesha. It cares about your graveyard. I don't know if I would run Scavenger Grounds necessarily, but don't use it. Like, you don't have it. It taps for a mana. It doesn't come into play tapped. So there are situations where, like, well, it's worth losing my graveyard to hit this person's graveyard. I would still probably run it. I run it in my Glissa deck, even though I use my own graveyard, because there's just times when it's worth that trade-off. I think it's over the limit now, but Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth, because I think it's like 25 now.
Yeah, that's got to be awfully close now.
I actually had that. I was going to put that in my notes, but when you actually look at the deck, most of his costs are not black.
Yes, there's not a ton of black in here. So you run the risk of helping somebody else out more than in a way that doesn't, because somebody else who drops that Cabal Coffers or has it in hand and they're not playing it because they don't have an Urborg out and not enough swamps, suddenly you just make their day and maybe don't help yourself enough to risk that. So I can see that. And it's $25. I'm not sure if it's that good in this deck anyway. So those are the big things. I think you could clean up a few, like you said, the slow fetches. There's a few things you could do there. But for the most part, I think that's a good looking land base.
Yeah.
How about creatures, Chris?
Well, what do we want to talk about with the creatures?
Anything you particularly like or don't like there?
Everyone, I'm going to get so much flack for this. I'm not a fan of Hakon. I'm sorry. I understand the concept of him, but I am not a fan of him. He's so situational in order to do certain things.
I don't think Hakon is necessarily a very good card in this deck, but it's one of those cards I think you run. I would be tempted to run it because I'm playing Knights, and there's so few situations where you can run it. I think it's one of those things you're like, I just want to do it to do it. So I think it's kind of like Necromancer's Covenant, where, like, people have been wanting an Orzhov zombie commander for so long just so they can run that card that even if it maybe isn't that great, people just want to stubbornly run it anyway. So I think there's a little bit of that going on maybe with Hakon, even wanting a Knight deck for so long to use him that they run him. But I agree, like, I don't know if he's that amazing, generally speaking, and I think we'll touch on this a little bit later. He needs more enablers in terms of stuff in the graveyard, that kind of thing. I think looting effects in red would be really useful for that, and there's not a lot of that here.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things when I look at that is you're not really doing graveyard shenanigans too much. If they happen, they happen. If not, whatever. Yes. So I think Hakon's just kind of a dead slot a lot of times. I could be wrong on this, so...
And I get it, but I'm just like I get why it's there, though. Because I if this was my deck, I would be very tempted to run it just for flavor reasons and because I wanted to do it, too. So I kind of get that. I like Elenda the Dusk Rose just in general, and I like Elenda in this deck. She's a vampire for one, or she's a knight for one. But there's a lot of things that buff your creatures. So by default, she does make you a zombie, but if you have any of your buffs in play, she can make you 5 or 6 tokens pretty easily when she dies.
And you bring her back.
And you bring her back with Alesha. I think that's a good inclusion here. I like her a lot.
So there's 2 of them that I was thinking about adding.
Okay.
One is Adriana, Captain of the Guard.
Yeah.
I had her in my short list too.
Yep, the melee ability that she has, plus she gives your other creatures melee is huge.
Yeah.
Because you guys are relatively small. They're not huge by any means. So just the ability to pump them during combat is pretty nice. Another one, and this is going way out on a limb here, is Olivia Mobilized for War.
I had that on my short list, but I couldn't figure out how to make it work. So I want to hear you explain this one.
Okay, because a lot of the vampires that came out during, I do believe it was the Ixalan sets, I think
Yes.
is when they came out. They are vampire knights.
Yes. Yep. There's a few from Shadows too. She's one as well.
Yep.
But yeah, there's quite a few in.
Now, Olivia, you discard a card, which is going to help you with your hack-on
Yep.
problems, and you turn them into a vampire. So you can play the vampire lords, other stuff like that, and you have your vampire knights. So then they're also knights, so they're triggering in with your night lords.
Mm-hmm.
It was something to tinker with, think about, I guess you could say.
Doesn't she have haste too? Or flying?
She has flying.
Okay. For 3.
Yep,
Yeah.
she's a 3/3 for 3 with flying. And then the special ability to, when a creature comes into play, you discard a card. You may discard a card. If you do, put a +1/+1 counter on that creature, and it gains haste.
So I'm buffing your tiny knights.
Yep. It was something that I was sitting here contemplating, looking at everything, going, new deck ideas.
Oh, only downside is you can't get her back with Alesha.
That is true. Which you can't get Adriana back neither.
Right.
But,
Adriana's more of a finisher.
yeah.
Yeah.
You kind of got to pick and choose when you're playing a tribal deck as to what you can play.
Well, I have one weird old suggestion I'm going to suggest here, and this is maybe a little bit of wanting to be cute, but I think it will work. This is a card out of Alliances, a creature, Limdul's Paladin. And it is 2. Max is looking it up right now because he has no idea what I'm
I
talking
actually looked
about.
at this card last
Did you?
night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's 2 black-red. It's a 0/3 with trample. So because it's a 0/3, you can recur it with Alesha.
Yep.
And it says when Limdul's Paladin is blocked, it gets +6/+3. So therefore, if somebody blocks it, it's a 6/6 then. So
Yep.
they're probably not going to want to block it. But if it isn't blocked, it deals no combat damage and defending player loses 4 life. So they're going to lose 4 life, and it can't be prevented because it's a loss of life. It's tougher to deal with as well. It's probably going to swing through pretty regularly. Now the downside is it doesn't. If you have your creature buffs out, it's not going to matter because it's 4 life, a flat amount. But there's a downside in the card that kind of winds up being upside here. And it says, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may discard a card. If you don't, sacrifice Limdul's Paladin and draw a card.
Yep.
So, number 1, you have your discard outlet to help your hack-on problem. But number 2, it's kind of a draw engine in these colors where you can bring it back with Alesha as you swing, comes back to your turn, you let it get sacrificed to draw a card, and then bring it back with Alesha on swing. So you have like a little bit of a mini draw engine with Limdul's Paladin, and you get to play Limdul's Paladin, which everyone is going to be like, what is that card? I have no idea what it is, and I need to read it.
Because it's an Alliances card, so the text is super tiny
The
and
text
all
is
squished
tiny.
together.
It uses 15 words to say what they can accomplish in 5 normally anyway. And it's old. That was also a card I would be really tempted to try out just to kind of show off.
I like it.
I do too. It's a great card, especially for just the draw itself.
Yeah, I think that's a fun way to get some extra draw baked in on a weird card. Any more creatures worth hitting on?
I have one more, which is kind of a really mean card, but Phyrexian Crusader.
Was that not on the list? I thought it was.
It's
It was
not.
not.
It has Infect.
It's basically the Mirrodin Crusader, but with Infect,
Yep.
kind of. Like it's evil twin, basically.
Yeah, another way of doing something, especially if you have your angel out. I can't even think of her name. Aurelia,
Gisela.
Yeah.
whatever. Evil angels. I don't like any of them.
Except Sarah.
Yeah, Sarah angels are
Sarah
beautiful.
Angel's the only one you like. All right.
Yep. Just another additional win con. I mean, because you can really start scaring someone and be like, hit you for 2, hit you for 2, hit you for 2.
It's also relatively fair infect damage. Like,
Yep.
I hear the argument about infect. Sometimes people are mad because it's not fair. If you're dying to Phyrexian Crusader, I mean, you have ample opportunity to deal with that.
Right.
Unless there's a perfect confluence of 4 buffs out and Gisela where you can one-shot somebody, in which case they probably also should have lost because you've built up that board state. I mean, that's a good one. I kind of agree with that.
I do have one other one if you guys don't have any.
I have one more I'll mention. I'm going to go to
Okay.
you. Knight of the White Orchid. It's recurable with Alesha, and it lets you get a land into play, assuming you have less than somebody else.
It's only a plains, though.
It's only plains. But because you are playing Mardu, you're not playing green, you're almost always going to have less lands in play than somebody in your pod. So I think that maybe is a meta call. You'll determine if that's good for you or not, but I kind of like that as well. What's your other one, Chris?
It is called Still Moon Cavalier.
That's the hybrid black-white one
Yep.
that has you can do 3 different things with pump abilities kind of
The
on
big
it,
thing about this is it has protection from black and white.
which is really, really relevant sometimes.
So 1 hybrid, white or black, gains flying until end of turn. 1 hybrid, it gains first strike until end of turn. And then 2 hybrid gains +1/+0 till end of turn. And it's a 2/1 for 3 mana. So I think it's just phenomenal. And it's a knight deck. It's a knight in general.
Yeah, I like it.
And it doesn't have a head.
No, it's awesome, isn't it?
That's awesome art.
It is.
Yeah, the art is pretty good.
Any more creatures from you, Max?
No, you hit Elenda. That was really my one
All right.
inclusion.
We will move on to enchantments next. I think we mentioned this earlier in the show for things that get confusing. Cathar's Crusade. But it can win games.
Game's got to end.
The game's got to end. That's exactly the way to put it. And Cathar's Crusade just ends games. Like, I've lost to plenty of Cathar's Crusades, and I've won Cathar's Crusades games. So that's a really good include here. There's one more I'm going to point out. Fervent Charge is an old card, and so maybe it's also a pet card. It's 4 mana. It's 1 Mardu, so it's 4 total. And attacking creatures you control get +2/+2. For 1 more mana, Dictative Heliod gives your creatures +2/+2 all the time.
And
not
it
just
has
when
flash.
attacking. And it has flash, so you can do it for a combat trick. And it's probably, even though it's 1 more mana, it's 2 white, 3 colorless.
Way easier to
So
cast.
it's probably easier to cast, even though it's 1 more mana. It's like pretty. This deck has a good amount of white sources in it. It's probably easier to consistently get out than Fervent Charge. But I get Fervent Charge is maybe it's a card that's an old card that he just wants to run because it's cool and weird and old, and I get that. But if that's not the reason, I would probably go with Dictate. Martyr's Cause is an enchantment where you sacrifice a creature to basically fog one thing. I'm torn on this one. I didn't like it at first because I'm like, there's not a lot of creatures in this deck. Usually you see that in a token deck or something or as a sack outlet. But Marchesa can bring a thing back every turn, so I guess your fodder is you always have something probably that you can sacrifice and then bring back. I don't entirely know if it's enough. I'm curious how it plays, and we'll have to ask Josh specifically.
Yeah, I'm curious about that one too.
What do you think of it, Max?
I get why he's running it. You know, it's a fog effect. I mean, we'll get to it later, but Teferi's Protection's a $30 card, so it's
It
not
is,
like
yes.
he's slotting that in. And,
Right, for sure. Martyr's Cause is cheap. It's like 50 cents.
Right, and it does fuel the Alesha synergies. I just think it is, unless you play in a meta where it's a lot of Voltron or like heavy-hitting commanders, you're going to have to sack a lot of stuff to prevent the damage from a token deck or
and you can only bring
2 or 3 creatures back.
And you can only bring a single thing back with Alesha.
Right.
So I think you'll fall behind quickly. The one thing I kind of thought here, but I don't know if there's enough lands, for the same exact casting cost, you can run Glacial Crevices. And if you can sacrifice a snow-covered mountain to do a full fog for the turn. But he's got a lot of basics, but they're heavily into basic plains. There's only, I think, 4 basic mountains, and that probably isn't enough. If it was a deck that had 8 or 9 basic mountains, so that's enough probably to run snow-covered mountains, and you probably already have 1 or 2 out, and being able to sack that for a full fog to buy yourself a turn or 2 is worth it. But I don't think there's enough basics here to use that, so that probably wouldn't work. I like Phyrexian Scriptures a lot. I'm really not sure what it's doing here.
I'm not sure neither. I'm reading it over and over again and just going.
Yeah.
So here's my assumption is you're using the first chapter to make Alesha to put a counter on or make her an artifact creature.
Okay.
And you're using the second chapter to wipe the board, and then you're attacking with her and bringing back something that just wipes. So you're up 2 creatures to most other people's,
none.
Yep.
None.
Or Thopters or something.
Right. But then again, you're going to hit that Brea deck. At least I would.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to hit a Brea deck or something like that where I'm not wiping their creatures at all, and I'm hitting my own. I just don't.
The reason I do not like this card, and I couldn't come up with something. Well, actually, I have something to replace this card with, which I always say in every deck, is it actually makes the creature easier to remove because it turns it into an artifact.
Yeah.
Yep. So you just open it up to another 50% of removal index.
When I went to put in the new Nightmare Sphinx, something Whisperer, in my Sphinx deck, I'm looking through the list of Sphinxes to remove. I'm pulling Sharding Sphinx because there's been so many times when that's been killed by somebody who has artifact removal. I like the card in the deck, and I've won games with it before by.
And that's why you should always run Shatter in every deck you play.
Except right.
Gotcha.
No, you got me. You got me. But yeah, no, that's a really good point. It does make your commander more vulnerable then.
Yeah.
Because I ran this when I was playing my Vela artifact creature deck for the same reason. Oh, I'll make Vela into an artifact creature so she doesn't die, and then none of my stuff dies next turn. And there were games when it worked, and there were enough games when I sat down and I'm like, oh, that guy's playing Brea, and I've got that in hand. I'm like, well, I can't play it. It's going to do no good there. Or even like that person's not playing artifact deck, but they happen to have a Wormcoil Engine out and something else, and I'm like, that barely does me any good either. So maybe it's a meta call, but I feel like it's just going to whiff too many times. And I like the card. I think those sagas, number one, they look great, and I think a lot of them are really fun cards. I just don't know if it's good enough.
Yeah.
I do have one recommendation here I would strongly consider is Shared Animosity. It did get a reprint in that weird like board game set, I think.
Explorers of Ixalan.
And basically you choose a creature type, and all creatures you control of that type get +1/+0 for each other creature that's attacking. So if you swing with 5 knights, they're all getting +4/+0. It works a little bit better in a swarm deck, but I think here it maybe works well enough since your creatures with Alesha are all knights and you're recurring them pretty regularly anyway. I think there's enough times when you're going to drop that before you swing and kill somebody who thought they were going to be okay. So I might replace that with the Phyrexian Scriptures. Anything from you guys there?
Chris, go ahead.
I've said this numerous times on the show, and I hope someone takes me seriously. But Phyrexian Arena absolutely, in my opinion, needs to be in every black deck.
Particularly this deck, I think, where number one, there's not a ton of draw.
Yep.
And by being Night Tribal, it's probably going to be a little bit slower meta where you're going 10 turns. I don't know if I would put Phyrexian Arena in every deck. Just because
Blasphemy.
Well, I
think you have it in every single one of your black decks.
Okay, no, you know what? I'll split this. Command Zone did a show where DJ and Josh were talking about Phyrexian Arena, and the argument they made was you play it for 3 mana, you don't get anything that turn. You get a card next turn, and you get a card after that. So it takes like 3 turns to get to you where Read the Bones gets. It takes 4 turns to get to Ambition's Cost range. I get that argument. My response would be, I'm not running those cards instead of Phyrexian Arena. I'm running Phyrexian Arena and all of those cards.
Yes.
Consistency, redundancy, that's all
Right.
what it's about.
See, the way I look at Phyrexian Arena in that aspect as to what you said is it is a permanent, so it pulls out permanent removal stuff.
Yeah.
So like if I want to jam my Cathar's Crusade, I have Phyrexian Arena out, and most people will want to remove Phyrexian Arena, or they just forget about it. One or the other is going to happen,
Sure.
which then pulls the removal away from Cathar's Crusade.
Yeah. Well, that's not wrong either. Like if someone spends an utter end on your Phyrexian Arena, that's not something you love, but there are way worse things to have someone utter end than Phyrexian Arena. Now, maybe once upon a time, I remember like someone hitting my Phyrexian Arena going, "Oh man," but like at this point in time, I think everyone's decks have gotten tweaked to the point where, they might not be like splashy cards, but like in your deck. That's not the thing that you need to be worried about, my friend. Something else is coming out next turn.
I get more irritated when like my signets are destroyed than my Phyrexian
Sometimes,
Arena.
yeah.
I'm just like, come on, I was on perfect color curve here, and now you're just doing this to me. Why didn't you kill Phyrexian Arena?
Or like, oh, you should have hit that Nemesis mask because next turn it's going on Glissa and all your stuff's going to have to block. And I'm going to bring back 3 artifacts and draw a card off each of them and do like there's enough times when I legitimately feel like I've drawn 2 cards off Arena. You're going to blow a 4-mana removal spell on it. I'm okay with that.
Yes.
Exactly. I would like to see a card we talked about last week, Blind Obedience.
Yeah.
Or Authority of the Consuls. There isn't much life gain in this deck, and if you add Phyrexian Arena, or later in the show we'll talk about maybe some more consistent draw in the color of black.
Well, I will say this about Blind Obedience. If you are playing a deck that can run Blind Obedience, I don't know if there's a situation where you're wrong to have it in your deck. There might be better cards, but I'm never going to see a deck with Blind Obedience and go, why is that in your deck? It's always a pain in someone's butt.
Right.
And sometimes it's a colossal pain in someone's butt. There are situations where it completely screws up your plans.
Yeah. I also think in this deck specifically, with all your creatures being 2/2s, 2/3s, base power and toughness, and your strategy, it sounds like, is to keep the board clear as much as possible so your little guys get through. Having that creature someone starts to rebuild with come in tapped gives you an extra turn. You don't have to worry about a blocker.
It's essentially extra damage. By someone not being able to drop a blocker to dissuade you from attacking, they're taking damage they wouldn't have otherwise taken. Like, it's almost a damage spell, like roundabout kind of way.
Right. It's more like a better guarantee Alesha's going to trigger.
Yeah.
It's a good guarantee that you can at least get
Right.
through with Alesha.
Well, that's actually a good point, because not only is it extra damage and a pain in the butt, you're playing a deck where you want to be swinging with your commander to recur stuff, and this makes that easier to do. No, that's a really good point. Reconnaissance. Chris is
Bad card.
hidden. He's changed his mind in the last 3 weeks since our hidden modular card.
Doesn't like
No, it is
gates.
a really, really good card.
It is a really, really good card. Radiant Destiny, I wasn't at first really sure about, because I had forgotten what it kind of did. And I'm like, what is this? And then I read it. I'm like, oh, yeah. No, that's good in here. That makes sense.
It's a great card.
It's a 3-mana anthem, and then once you hit the City's Blessing, with City's Blessing can never leave.
Yes.
Yeah. All your creatures have vigilance on.
Yeah, I like it. Any other enchantment stuff you guys want to bump on here before we move on?
I can't really think of anything, because I think of what I run in my Alesha deck, and it's really close to what's in here.
Yeah, and this deck's also a little bit different, but
Yep.
no, I think that
I can't think of, in this color combination, what I would be wanting to run.
Right.
we will move on to Planeswalkers. This one's going to take us a while. Elspeth Sun's Champion, and she's really good. Anyone have anything they want to add there? No? Yeah, she's really good, and she's going to make you a bunch of tokens and wipe the board if she needs to, and just generally
when you
be annoying.
-3 her.
Yeah,
Yes.
I like Alesha a lot.
Thank you.
All right, sorceries. Chris, what do we got there?
Sorceries. Where are sorceries? There's some sorceries. We got 12 of them. So I'm just going to do a basic overview of them. All of them look very nice. We got 1, 2, 3, 4 board wipes in here.
Yep.
Your Austere Command, obviously. We have Hour of Revelation, which I want to stop on this one and discuss this one. Yes, it's a really good card, but the reason I would not want to play this in this deck is due to 3 white. The 3 white
white's
casting
tricky.
cost. Yes. Now, I understand you have land tax in this deck, you have extra planes or white sources or whatever, so yeah, you're probably good with this. But if I'm not mistaken, I do believe in his notes that he told us is that he does have a problem hitting color curves sometimes.
Correct. And we'll fix that in artifacts.
I know it's not a perfect replacement because it doesn't hit all things, but I would probably run Blasphemous Act in that slot.
Probably.
Because it's a 1-mana board wipe. It's a 1-mana board, like, you're not casting it for the most part. I mean, I guess I've cast it for 3 or something when I've been desperate. But okay, so it's a 3-mana board wipe. That's usually a 1-mana board wipe.
It is
Right.
really good. Retribution in the Meek, obviously.
Makes
pretty
sense
good.
here, yeah.
The thing that does catch me off is, aside from Hour of Revelation, there's no Wrath of God, no Damnation, nothing like that in here.
Or Toxic Deluge, which you can do for 3.
Yep.
But Retribution makes sense. Austere Command, like, they make sense. And I would probably still run Blasphemous Act over any of those.
So we got Read the Bones and Wheel of Fortune for card draw. I think there was one other one in here. I don't remember if it was a fancy one. Nope, that was it.
Yep.
I think it's not enough.
No.
Number one, now this is a good deck for Wheel of Fortune. I think people sometimes play Wheel of Fortune badly.
Because it's Wheel of Fortune.
Because Wheel of Fortune, and I guess I don't see it that much anymore because it's hyper expensive.
I found mine, by the way.
You were like worried the other night, Max was like, I don't know where my Wheel of Fortune is.
That's okay. I was looking for a whole bunch of cards the other day and found 2 deck boxes in my basement. Found all my full art unglued mountains. Found my full art Gultas, my full art Llanowar elves. Found my other Damnation and my swords.
Like,
and
I'm rich.
I'm like, where was all this stuff hiding?
You do this like once a year. Literally once a year, Chris goes, I found 4 boxes in my basement. I've been looking for these cards for like 2 years.
And one of those boxes was my Wheel of Fortune, too. I'm like,
Nice.
I know I have one. Where is it?
But I think people do sometimes, because it has a reputation, and I've seen it cast plenty of times when someone does it, I'm like, oh man, you're just going to refill that person's hand who's down to 1 card. Or I've had it fix my mana base, like, oh man, I'm hurting here. I haven't drawn a land in 3 turns, and you've just given me 2 lands and 3 other gas cards. I think people oftentimes aren't paying attention to the board state around them when they cast it. But I think in this deck, it has the added bonus of putting stuff into your graveyard in an Alesha deck. So I like it a lot as long as you're kind of aware of when you cast it and
I'm very careful when I
don't
cast
do so.
Wheel.
Yeah. You can really mess up games with a poorly cast Wheel of Fortune.
Usually I'll hold it until it's like the absolute last moment, like I need to cast it, or if it's right away in the game, I'm just like, well, I'm just getting shafted by what's going on the table. I need to cast this to try to find
Some
something.
of the best Wheel of Fortune I've ever seen are turn 2 Wheel of Fortune when someone opens like land, Soul Ring, Signet, move on to turn 2, land, Wheel of Fortune. You're like, oh man, when the opponent's done one land and pass, you're like, okay, well, I guess I'm pitching this cool hand that I specifically kept because I liked it.
The one in here I'm not too keen on is Primeval's Glorious Rebirth.
There's a few legends, but I don't know if there's enough.
I think there's 13.
CMC.
Yeah, I counted just over 10. I mean, granted, Alesha lives through it. I just don't understand it.
Living Death is better, honestly,
I
in my
think
opinion.
Yeah.
I think it's fine. I think that's a lot of mana for a card that isn't probably going to win a game like it does in some decks.
I'm thinking it's mainly used to bring back the legendaries that
Yeah.
Alesha can't, like your
Sure.
Gisela and stuff like that.
That's why I like Living Death or Obsidat's Aid.
That would be a good one. Yeah.
Plus, Obsidian's Aid can flex and like get back that Cathar's Crusade. Yeah, no, that's a good call.
Yep.
And it's cheaper than this is to cast.
A lot of times, and I know we were discussing not seeing many Living Deaths in our last episode and stuff like that. I still like the card, and a lot of times I use it as a board wipe.
Yeah.
I don't actually use it as, I got all this stuff in my graveyard. Cool, I'm going to reanimate everything. It's like, I have one thing in my graveyard. You have two. You have one. You have nothing. Cool, I'm just going to wipe the board with this card.
And it's a sacrifice, so that gets around a lot of stuff.
Yep.
And the way it works, it throws chaos into people's plans. No, I think it's probably still underplayed.
I also like Demonic Collusion in this deck.
Yeah, I did too.
So it's a 5-mana tutor with buyback of discarding 2 cards. Well, you just solved your hacking problem.
Yep.
I mean, granted, there's better tutors to run at cheaper costs, but when you want to dump stuff into your yard,
Yeah.
this is great.
I would maybe run a little more draw here, whether it was red looting effects, excuse me, or black draw, lose some life spell. I just think the deck needs a little more draw.
Agreed.
Instance, Max, what do we got there?
We have 7 instants. It's literally mostly removal. Anguish
Yeah.
and Manking, Chaos Warp, Pull from Eternity, and Comeuppance are both really cool. Return to Dust, Swords to Plowshares, and Utter End. Comeuppance is great. I've always wanted to try to run that card in any of my decks, but
It's a fog that has upside.
it's a cheaper Teferi's Protection kind of
yeah.
because like it's either going to save you from like a combat damage or it's going to save you from a massive burn spell or something.
The one big suggestion I had here, because by and large, this is what, if I had this deck, that's what my instant spells would look like as well, is most of those removal spells, so I'm pretty much on board. The one thing I would maybe consider here is Boros Charm. It's one more double strike enabler for a big swing through, and it also saves your board. We've been talking about that a little bit lately, is protecting your board state. That gives you the flex to do that as well.
And it's 4 to the face.
I just want to see someone.
And it's 4 to the face.
I want to see someone force someone in the face
Yeah.
with a Boros Charm, and they're like, "What's your life at? 4." Boros Charm, and they're like,
Yeah. That's
What?
legit. And people do, like, that's... I've sat there in games at 2, 3, 4 life before for multiple turns before I either won or died. There are situations where that is enough to win a
I've
game.
been upping my decks that I play with Lightning Bolt in them, just because of stuff like that.
Yeah.
4 to the face is relevant, and that's the worst of the 3 modes. So that's what should tell you something about Boros Charm.
That is not true. That is not the worst of the 3 modes. That's the best of the 3 modes.
Okay, all right.
Says the burn player.
Says the burn player, right, exactly. Any other instance anyone wants to mention here?
No,
I
thank
think
you.
that covers it. Like, those are pretty solid. That's probably what I would run in that package as well. Artifacts. Max, I believe you had some things you wanted to mention here.
I do. So there's 13 total.
Yep.
There's all 3 signets, which I want, Chris, your opinion on that because you run Alesha. Do you run all 3 signets?
I do.
Okay. I didn't know if it's, because it's 3 colors, people say, only run the ones where your curve is heavy.
Nope, I run all 3 because it's still gonna. It just fixes your curve in general.
Right.
Like if you're sitting with a red source and a white source, and you draw an Orzhov signet, that gives you your black source.
Right.
And being able to do that Soul Ring in the signet feels so good too.
Yep.
There's Door to Destinies for just Anthem effects.
Yep. And it can win games. That's also kind of a win con.
I really like Key to the City in this game. It fuels the graveyard and it makes Alesha unblockable. Yeah. And you can pay the 2 to draw a card.
Protects Alesha, get that swing through to get that creature back, maybe into a board state you couldn't normally swing into. I like it too.
Greaves and Boots are in here. Mind's Eye for some draw, which is kind of slow, but I think Dana has some notes on that.
Yeah, I just wrote that that you mentioned Phyrexian Arena, Chris. I would replace that with something else for draw. There's been times, like I run it in my mono white Zero deck because it's mono white and your options are limited. And there's been times when I've dropped it and had 3 mana free and nothing else to do that turn because I've had enough blockers from, Elspeth or something, and Zero has Vigilance. I've been fine, and I've been able to go on the board and draw 3 cards, and then I don't care. If I draw 1 card to turn off it after that, I don't mind.
Yep.
But there's been enough times when I've been like, I can't cast this right now because it's going to suck up my whole turn. I don't have mana free to use it anyway, so I don't want to spend 5 mana and then wait till next turn to get anything off it. And that's in mono white where I'm desperate for draw, and it sometimes burns me. I think here where you have access to Phyrexian Arena or Outpost Siege is a great card. Or even just like the black draw spells, Ambition's Cost, Anguish Unmaking. What's the one with... Converge out of
Painful Truth?
Painful Truth, because you're in a 3-color deck and you can probably draw 3 for 3 pretty often in this deck.
Parker and I were actually talking about Painful Truths because I was doing my notes last night at the store as I was working. He's like, "What do you think about Painful Truths?" And I'm like, "I don't personally run it because there are better options.
Sure.
Because I run more of the red card draw.
Sure.
In mine personally.
Well, and I would probably actually, I mentioned this before, but that makes sense again because it gets stuff in your graveyard.
Yep.
Like if you're going to do a Cathartic Reunion, for example, it's going to put 3 cards in your hand,
and
but
2 in the graveyard.
But let you put stuff in the graveyard as well that you can then bring back with Alesha.
The best red card draw spell that I can think of that I probably should bring up during sorceries is Faithless Looting.
Yes.
Because of flashback.
And it plays perfectly with this deck by letting you recur that stuff that you have to pitch.
Yep.
Yeah.
Another draw artifact is Phyrexian Vault. So it's 3 mana and then 2 tap it, sack a creature to draw a card. I don't personally like this. I get you want to put stuff in your yard to reanimate it, but again, Alesha can only do one thing.
And you have to spend 3 mana to do that. So you're spending
Right.
2 mana here to sack the creature, to draw a card, and then 3 to bring it back. So essentially 5 for the loop, I believe, right?
Two to bring
4.
it back.
4
overall.
4 total. Okay, which isn't bad. Like that's not terrible. I don't know if it's quite good enough, and I think that I would just rather not sacrifice the creature and draw a few cards off
Right.
of Outpost Siege or Arena or something.
I mean, if you're comparing this to Mind's Eye, I think I'd keep Mind's Eye and just that 2 mana is just Mind's Eye mana
I would
on
probably
my
just
opponent's draw steps.
I would probably just replace both with Arena and Outpost Siege.
Well, yeah.
And now I think if this was a Grave Pact kind of dictate deck where you had those cards in here and you were going to then cause people problems by sacrificing a creature that you're going to bring back, that's a little bit different. But you're not doing that in this deck. So that's why I think there's better options to that as well. I tend to agree.
Then we have Vanquisher's Banner, just another anthem.
I really like Vanquisher's
I do
Banner
too.
in this deck.
Yep.
It is straight up, that's probably
The best.
the best card draw spell that
Yeah.
is in this deck right now.
Yeah. For some equipment, we have Sigiled Sword of Valorin out of M19. Gives a dude +2/+0 in Vigilance and makes it a knight. So, hey, knight tribal. And then when the creature attacks, you create a 2/2 knight token with Vigilance that's attacking. So it's not just it has to sit there. It's coming in hard and fast.
Yep.
This is a really good deck for that, for sure.
And then there's also Spear Heliod, which is
It felt not good enough.
yeah, I mean, I think Dictate of Heliod would just be better for 2 more mana. And I mean, spending 3 mana and tapping it to destroy something that dealt damage to you just seems like there's better uses of mana.
Yeah.
The one that is definitely missing would be Chromatic Lantern.
In a 3-color deck,
Which I
perfect.
do believe was in his notes that he will be picking up now that Guilds of Ravnica is
Yeah.
reprinting
Yes.
it.
So it will be coming. And to the Hour of Revelation earlier, there's your triple white.
Yeah.
The big one that I honestly thought about, and I actually run this in my Alesha deck, because I ran into issues with mana fixing, was sort of the Animist.
Yeah. What also makes Alesha tougher to deal with.
Yep.
Because she has first strike, so that's a pain in the butt anyway. She's a 3/2, right?
Yep, so it makes her a 4/3 with first strike, or if you enchant or equip any one of your knights.
Yeah. And with the amount of basics he's running, you're
Yep.
not going to run out of basics.
Yeah.
That might be why I run a little heavier basics in mine as well.
No, I like that's a good call. Sort of the Animus, I think, is just generally a really nice card. Just full
Especially
stop.
in a multicolored deck, it helps you fix.
Yeah.
It's another card that, because you're not playing green, so it's almost like it is a ramp spell for you.
Right.
It definitely is. And one that sticks around because someone has to remove it.
Yep.
They can kill
Right.
the creature, but you can just put it on the next one.
There's
and
been
do
a
it
lot
all
of
over
times
again.
I've watched them blow up like my Phyrexian Arena again and other stuff, and I'm like, cool, I'll keep my sword and just keep putting out more lands.
The last deck that really needs it is my Reki History Kamigawa deck. But I still run it in that deck. Cantrips, which is
Blasphemy,
nice.
it's not legacy. Legendary.
Yes, it is.
It is
Oh,
legendary.
it is.
Yeah. So it cantrips for 1, but like 2, even if it didn't, because I put it in originally when I first built the deck, because I'm like, oh, it's legendary, and I had 1. And I assumed I would replace it because I'm playing green. It does work. Like, I'd never want to take it out because 4 turns later, I've suddenly ramped 4 lands. It makes Reki tougher to kill. Even in that deck, it's super useful. But in colors that don't have land ramp, that's great.
One other one that I would suggest, and I think, Chris, you've toyed around with this card in the past, would be Stronic Resonator to copy Alesha's ability to bring back 2 things.
Yep.
Or
So it's 2 extra mana on top of her ability that already costs 2 to activate or 3 to
2.
activate? 2 to activate?
Yep. The only downside, and I'm going to speak specifically for this deck compared to mine, is it seems like this deck is not, if it does play at the graveyard, cool. If it doesn't, whatever.
Yeah.
Mine is more built of, I would love to just completely play with my graveyard the whole game, but I can, choose not to at the same time. So in this deck, I'm not quite sure about it, but it would be a nice thing to try.
right.
I feel like it's a card that you have to probably play with it to realize how well it works in your particular deck.
Yep.
And if Josh wrote us back and said, yeah, I tried it and it just didn't, I didn't have enough targets to do 2 things consistently.
I hate you
I
guys
would-
so much.
I
I'm
would
never
believe
talking
him.
to you again.
But I would believe that. Like if he told me that he tried it and it didn't quite work, I would believe that.
Yeah.
Whereas in your deck, if you're like, yeah, dude, I tried it and I didn't have enough stuff in your deck, I'd be like, what? You always have 4 things in your
That's
graveyard.
bad deck building, Chris.
Right.
You would be surprised. I think my Alesha deck, I run 17 creatures in it.
Yeah, I know it's a really low count, but they
Really
all
low.
make tokens.
But they're
so.
so powerful. Each
Yeah.
one is.
Anything else here about artifacts?
I don't have anything else. What about you guys?
No, I think we kind of hit it. As far as I'm concerned, that was good enough. I hit the stuff I want to talk about anyway. So, final thoughts here on this deck.
I think this deck's pretty solid the way it is. I have a few tweaks here and there. It'd be cool to see. I guess I'd kind of want to play against it once and see.
Yeah. I would too. I like Knights. I think Knights have been a fun tribe I've always kind of liked, and we've never had a good commander, and we still don't have one for Knights in particular. But I think this commander really makes sense. Knights are low to the ground. You can bring them back pretty consistently with Alesha.
I
wish
think
she was
the
a knight,
best
but-
knight general is Ariel.
I also kind of like. I think Ariana, who you mentioned for this deck, Max,
Chris did.
or Chris did.
Adriana?
Adriana. I kind of like her too because I think being able to stack melee triggers with extra combat steps in red would be interesting.
Yep. The only thing about that though is I don't think there's quite as many red knights as there are black knights.
There
so.
are, yeah. So yeah, I agree. I think it's a really it strikes a really good balance. So we did in one of our small deck techs, we did Chris's buddy Rafael Garcia. I was gonna get on him for your Guildgate problem.
He's gonna hunt
He
me
is.
down.
But we did his shirtless bear tribal deck, which was a fun.
Oh, I
fun
loved that.
That was a
deck.
great deck.
But the problem that deck probably had was, I'm guessing you're going to struggle to win games against things higher than precons for the most
Yep.
part. And he knew that, like that was intentional. I think this really strikes a good balance between being a specifically themed deck. He wants to go Knight Tribal with this deck, and also probably playing pretty well. And that's a tough balance to stride sometimes, is to hit those two sides, and I think it probably does it.
Yep. The one thing I do have to suggest, and I was actually reading the comments on your tapped out, don't fall into the trap of coat of arms.
No.
People suggested
Or
it.
be
Don't
super careful with
Yes.
it. I've killed people because they've screwed up and played bad coat of arms before.
Yep. I mean, because a lot of you guys are vampires or humans or whatever. So if anyone has that other subtype with it,
Yeah, yep.
they're going to get pumped off of your own stuff too.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. Coat of arms is really, really risky unless you're super cautious with it. That's a good example of a card that you maybe shouldn't play because you can screw it up.
Yep.
All right. That is it for Josh's Knights of Alesha deck. Thank you very much for supporting us and for sending us your deck.
Yes, thank you, Josh. It was a great deck. I enjoyed looking at it.
I love Mardu. All of you
You
guys
do.
who do deck techs, when you guys have them come up, send me those colors.
Send us the more new decks.
If you guys send blue, you might hear me kind of moping and crying during that episode.
We haven't done much that has blue in it, I don't think.
That teamer deck, but it was
Not much blue
the
in it.
shirtless bear fighter deck
Yeah.
was not much blue.
Yeah, we've not done many. And we got Boros next in the list, I believe.
Is that Dr. Mike?
It is.
Oh,
Nice.
Dr. Mike game on.
Well, I believe Max has our sign-out question this week.
I do have our sign out question this week. So, over the past few weeks of episodes, Dana has been talking about his new Laughless deck.
Yes,
And as of this week, it has been shelved.
it has.
And your reasoning that you've told our Slack community and people in the shop and us personally is it plays too linear, as in your turns are mana, Laughless, drop a 1-drop dragon, make a dragon swing.
Yes.
And that's kind of your main reason when you do shelve a deck is because it plays the same too much every time you play it.
Yes.
So this past week, I got to play a game with you, and you're playing Reki like normal, and I like playing against Reki, but I'm sitting there and I'm watching and played the game, and I lost because Reki, did what it's good at. Came home, and as I'm letting the Rockstar wear out of my system, laying in bed, I'm like,
What you texted me, you're like, I'm lying here in bed with a Rockstar draining out of my... I was like, literally what you said.
Yeah. I'm like, why is Reki still together? That was my question, because to me, when I watch you play Reki, it is the same type of linear play style. You play Reki, play a green creature, draw a card, play a green creature, draw a card, play a green creature, draw a card. Like, I don't see the difference between Reki and Laughless, except Reki is interesting, and it's just a Rube Goldberg machine, essentially.
So I have an answer, but I'm wondering if Chris has an answer, or if Chris knows what I'm going to say. He's kind of smiling here a little bit.
I think it's because Dana draws cards.
That was my guess too, honestly. And I told Dana that. I said, I think I know the answer, but I want you to answer the question on air, because in my mind, when I see Reki get played, it is very linear. It doesn't matter what green creature with trample you're playing. It's a green creature with trample that's going to draw you a card.
They're all the same creature.
Right.
For the intense purposes of the deck, it's all the same dude.
Yeah.
Chris's answer is a half of it. I like drawing cards. All my decks draw cards. I like drawing cards. It's also much busier than that Lathwest deck is. You nailed it on the head. You're like, I play my mana rocks, get to Lathwest, play like a 1 or 2 drop dragon, make a dragon and pass a turn. But every turn is like that because it's red. I only have so many ways to put cards in hand and gain resources. And so I play 1 dragon and make 1 token and do a thing, and that's pretty much it. With that Reki deck, I can get those fun cycles going where I will play and draw a card or 2 and play and draw a card or 2, and I get that big turn where like all of a sudden everyone at the table's like, oh, I think we're going to lose right now. And it turns into a bunch of stuff, and I'm trying to get to that point. It's just much more interactive for me, and I'm doing a bunch of things, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, I've got 12 mana free here, and I need to play a creature to get a creature, and I have to try to like get this chain going. It's essentially Storm. It's just more interactive for me as a player than Lathwest ever was.
Okay.
And I get to draw a bunch of cards. So
He just doesn't like red.
Yeah.
I'm trying hard, man. I built that Avacyn deck. I got this Lathwest one. I was just talking about Adriana. I'm trying to get there.
I still have my red deck together.
It is the 6th best color in EDH. So thanks, Matt Morgan.
Tell this Mr. Matt Morgan.
The talent. He's the talent.
He is the talent on EDH Redcast.
How many burn decks top 8'd the last Star City Games Classic?
I think, because I know he's a Modern player, I think he does play Modern. I think he plays Burn and Modern. I think he does.
Oh, we could be buddies then.
Yeah.
He can talk all the crap he wants about red then if he's a burn player.
Yeah, he plays a lot of Modern, so.
Well, Dana, thank you for explaining why Reki's still together, even though I see it as the same. And your reasoning does make sense. It is, you get to that turn where all of a sudden there's a Hero's Podium and a Dragon Throne of Tarkir, and if you don't sequence it correctly, you screw up the whole turn.
So then we'll extend that out to our listeners, and this will be the question we post on Twitter after the show airs. So decks that are your favorite deck, obviously people like decks for different reasons, but like what play style thing in your deck is it that you like about that deck or that makes it fun for you? Let us know, and we'll repost that on Twitter, whether it's drawing cards or maybe you like playing tokens or like playing with your graveyard. Like there's a thing about your deck that you like that makes it fun for you. It might make another deck not fun, so you shelve it because it doesn't do that thing. So
Playing the Mike and Trike combo twice in one night.
Exactly.
It was not Mike and Trike. It was Blood Bond. And I only got to play it once because he swan songed it the second time.
Dirty players.
Game's gotta end.
Game's gotta end. That's true. All right. Well, show's gotta end too. So until next week, I am Dana.
I'm Max.
And I'm Chris.